Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Dear Darling, and shall we see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhallow today, where we'll be relaxing as per usual, late night, because we've had a D&D session. It was a really nice one. If anything, it was more of a self-indulgent session, more so than the others. Well, actually, primarily what it was is because one of the act we're in currently focuses quite heavily on one character's backstory more. That's kind of been like the big through line. That this one was more of a sort of like a, not a sidetrack, but a way for the other two players to also have a chance for their story to progress as well. But good evening, everyone. Right now, excuse me. Fawnhallow, it's 10:39 PM on Monday, April 14th, 2025. As a peek behind the curtain, I do think that's something I definitely try and take a lot of consideration for in the D&D campaign, because obviously each of the players have their own acts, their own sort of like arcs. They want to go through their own sort of motivations and stories. But the thing is, those are 3 different stories a lot of the time, or 4 different stories for the other group, which makes it a little bit difficult necessarily to interweave everything together, because obviously you kind of want to, if you're going to do like story arcs, you focus kind of on one story arc. When that's resolved, then you go on to the next one. But at the same time, you kind of want all the players to still stay engaged, and I don't mean like in a literal sense, but as if my players wouldn't be engaged, but it's kind of a sort of thing where it's like, oh, you know, I don't want my players to go like 2 years essentially without any progress, obviously, to their character arc. So really quite a difficult thing to do is to be able to weave together the arcs to make sure that, while even if you are focusing on one, you can still bring the others in a cohesive way, which is kind of what's happening on both of them right now. Like, they're both focusing on one of the characters' arc mainly, but then there's things which sort of interweave with the other characters here and there. I would say that this campaign, I think the 3 characters certainly have a stronger focus on their story, while the other campaign, it's not that they don't have a stronger focus, but like 2 of the characters, one of them, you know, I'm not sure his own story arc is all that important to him, and the other one is more defined about what he does rather than like what has already happened, then I suppose the discovery of what's happened, which makes it a little bit easier. And the other character is just so unbelievably secretive with her backstory, the fact that the other characters and players basically know nothing about that backstory, and the opportunities I've given have been swiftly, not rejected per se, but, you know, for all players, I give opportunities to be like, hey, you can speak about your character's backstory here. Hey, here's a really good time to be able to bring it up naturally, you know, as a way to sort of pace it out, because ultimately, I think most people want for other players to know about their backstory, right? Because it's the sort of thing like, well, if they don't know about it, then it's only you, which is completely fine. But in the sense that it's a collaborative storytelling thing, you know, it's more, for me personally, from only my perspective, more satisfying for a story arc if you can eventually find out about the dark, tragic past, and then we can help overcome it together. But yeah, in the other campaign, it's like, as I say, one of them probably doesn't care that much about the story. One of them is more defined about like what's happened and what they do now. One of them does have care about that story and has a focus on that arc right now. And the other one, it's hard to weave it in because they've divulged essentially nothing about their story, which makes me sort of, I suppose, a bit more hesitant here and there to weave too much in too quickly, because it's sort of like, I don't want to put the player in a position where it's just like, oh, they don't want to review any more story, so their stuff's mostly taken with dream sequences. But yeah, this one for this campaign, at least, like I try, but there's a reasonably equal weight, I think, between all the stories, and I've helped weave together the story in such a way which it makes it possible that they can sort of interweave between each other rather than it just being one story, next story, next story. And this one had like pretty big progress, I think, for 2 of the stories. I'm not going to give too many details because I can't really say too much without giving the game away for a lot of them. But one of them was, I think I mentioned before, basically they're meeting, quote unquote, their family members who seemingly like want to kill them, essentially. But, you know, they're starting to see that some of the dynamics are a little bit different here and there, with introduction to one of the characters, and even more so, I suppose, illuminated like this. So it's a story beat which I think my intention was to prompt a lot more questions from all three players' side, being like, the nature of this seems odd. It's, on the surface level, it looks rather cut and dry, you know, it's kind of like a warlock backstory, you know, a deal with the devil kind of sort of thing, but there's things about it which this session was meant to be like, hey, some of this is kind of really, really weird, even in a sense of that this, even in a way that you'd be expecting it to work, or even unexpected, or even from like an antagonistic standpoint, it's still really strange. But at the moment, I'm like, I can't give you any answers. I'm not going to give you any direct answers. I'm going to let you figure it out or theorize yourself, because that's part of the fun, isn't it? It's kind of like boring if I go, here's a question, here's the immediate answer. But the other one is basically the character is an amnesiac, doesn't remember their past, and is undead, essentially, so it doesn't remember their previous life. They've discovered the not so secret fact that one of the NPCs is also in a similar situation, except for she does remember a lot of her previous life. Not everything, but she remembers a lot more than this player does. And there's now some interesting dynamics of trying to explore that, and now the player has found a way to be able to see even more of his previous life. But at the same time, there's a lot of very weird unknowns about it, which my players are smart, they've definitely picked up on, but it's hard to come up with an answer to what this means. Like, I'm sure the biggest question they might have is like, why do they have this weird interleaving of memories? There's basically the sensation of like looking at one thing but like feeling the sensation of another in all of the memories, and that's very, very weird and disconcerting. What does that mean? Well, I can't say. But he's gotten a glimpse at another part of something which is relevant, perhaps, to his previous life. Unsurprisingly, it is relevant to his previous life. I'm not going to say in what form or how, but or why necessarily it's been seen now. But that's, you know, that's what players to theorize, I think. So it's pretty good and weird in a way, because a lot of it, I think, was me talking about this NPC's backstory and illuminating it, which I did very much worry at the time, you know, when I was like conceiving, when I was thinking about it, being like, oh, is it going to be pretty boring? I'm basically just doing like, it's another thing if it's another player character being like, this is my backstory and this is what happened. That's kind of engaging in its own way. But as an NPC, I feel like because I have so many NPCs in the game, it makes it a bit weird to just sort of talk about it. But I would say I think the players actually like really genuinely enjoy it. This might be one of their favourite NPCs, I assume. And hearing her backstory was interesting, because I think, at least the impression I got, was it raised a lot of questions on their end, of like things which is like, that's strange, why, how did that happen? There are answers, but of course can't reveal everything, and she doesn't know the answer to everything, but it helps also sort of direct things for the player as well, I think, to sort of give reflection of like, maybe we can start to think about where we came from, where I came from, what this means, what I've done, etc, etc, etc. And I think that in itself is very engaging. But maybe it's not, I don't know, maybe my players are just like, oh, this sucks, come on dear darling, get something else entirely. But yeah, what are we going to talk about today? I don't know. Played more Rabbit and Steel last night. It's fiendishly difficult, but we're getting much better. Like, we're buttery smooth, I think, on doing Kingdom Outskirts now. What else? I think we can do the first two fights of Church Mouse Streets pretty well, to be honest. Some of the later ones, the third one and the fourth one. The fourth one we've beaten like once. It's very difficult, I think. The third one, we can get pretty far in it consistently. Most of the time we end up dying because we don't have enough DPS on it, rather than anything else. Which is not, you know, that's just kind of how it is. Sometimes you got to squeeze out every single bit of efficiency you can, but that, of course, is difficult in its own right. So, but we're getting there. I'm pretty confident about what eventually be able to defeat this boss to a level of consistency, which is nice. We had a go at one of the other different worlds as well. And it's the amazing part is by going from that world to this world, we immediately see the sort of progress that we've actually made, which was invisible when you sort of do the same thing over and over again in the other world. In this new world, we did we make it to the final boss of that world? No, I don't think we did. I think we got pretty far on the third boss or something, which is pretty crazy for a sight read, to be honest. Sorry, I'm playing Neopets at the same time. Maybe we did get to the final boss, I can't remember. Anyway, we did exceedingly well, and I was like, whoa. That's just like how much intrinsic knowledge has sort of been imprinted into our minds now. And it's a very exciting thing to do so. If anything, I suppose I could say that with D&D as well. The sort of weaving together of story arcs. I think it's probably quite a difficult thing to do. I've only done, apart from these two campaigns are the longest campaigns I've ever done. The other two campaigns I've done, like one of them went on for like 2-3 sessions. It was that person's first time DMing as well, and it was a lot of our first times actually playing D&D. So it was okay. It was not bad, all things considered. Because DMing is hard, and I don't mean that like as any sort of shot towards a DM or anything like that. Because we were all sort of learning, all sort of figuring out, but I certainly wasn't the best player in the sense that I remember there was like a plot hook and I just completely ignored it. Not intentionally, but I was just like, I don't think my character would find this particularly interesting. But if anything, I think it's more illuminative of like a session 0 being required, because I was just like the plot hook was essentially like seeing like a trail of goblins, and my play character went, I don't know why would I just follow a load of goblins? That seems like a very good way to die. I played on the other session, the other campaign. I actually got pretty far as well. Got to like level 3, I think, or so. So, but I don't know, like that one was didn't quite get to the stage of like revealing character arcs, I think, like that. And the first D&D session campaign I did was a Curse of Strahd one, so that was like a fixed adventure where the character's own character arcs don't really play into it too much, but it's more like their personalities come through. So I don't really know if I'm doing it well, if I'm doing it particularly poorly. I have some self-confidence I'm doing it pretty decently well, because it's not particularly easy, I think, to weave together story arcs like this. I spent a lot of time sort of planning out, like trying to get information about what people wanted or expect or imagined their story arcs to be, and sort of like compiling it together, being like, okay, how can I weave this together in a cohesive way with an overarching story that also allows each of the characters to shine? I can draw upon it if need be, because I didn't want to rely on dream sequences all the time. And I think I came up with some very satisfying things. Like one of the characters in this campaign, of course, has the family members coming to find them, which allows me sort of more flexibility of exactly when family members can get introduced to be like nice story beats. I mean, I don't think that's like an unfair peel behind the DM curtain. I highly doubt my players sitting there being like, "Oh, dear darling must have planned when I'm going to meet every single family member down to a T." No, I have vague ideas when it's going to happen, and I have vague ideas of where or what the nature of it's going to be like, but I don't know exactly when. It's more just like a few sessions in advance. I'm like, I think this would make most sense. I can see a course coming up ahead where they might run into one. And yeah, you can always rely on a good dream sequence to allow things to happen. But yeah, I don't know, it's sort of like a story arc braid. It's a very difficult thing to get right, and I don't think I've got it down perfectly, but I think I've given it a pretty solid attempt in a way which I think the players do find engaging. At least the impression I get is that they very, very much are engaging with it. So I'm not going to do them a disservice and be like, they're not engaging. They are, they're curious. I think it's always a good sign when you do something, you tell something about a story arc, and then the player immediately goes, but how could that be because of this or this, or this? It shows they're actively engaging and thinking about it. And I'm just like, yes, think about it. I can't say anything, but yes, keep thinking about it. yeah. I'm trying to draw like a weave together of story arcs to as a little doodle, but it's a little bit difficult, I think, to do so. Something like that. Not for a doodle, for the Animal Crossing thumbnail art. But yeah, I'm interested to see how it goes, because I think it's very easy to start off being able to weave together story arcs seamlessly, because you have no basis to sort of go off. There's nothing which necessarily the players will like find fault with, right? They're not going to look at it and be like, hey, this doesn't make sense, because there's no sort of like overarching thing yet to be like, this doesn't make sense. There's no basis to sort of compare to, is what I mean. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. I just mean, as I say before, it's going to be up to me to make sure that it stays consistent as best as I can make it. I am absolutely sure there's going to be plot holes at some point. I'm going to forget something and something's not going to make sense, and my player's going to be like, hey, you know that thing back then? How did that work? And that's, I think, not where the worry comes in, because I think it's silly to be worried about that, you know. I'm not going to be worried about failing something which is going to be rather difficult to foresee coming in the first place. But it's certainly something I'm cautious of, to be like, I need to make sure at least the parts I can control are cohesive and well put together, you know? Anyway, I think I'll wrap this episode off here. I don't really know what I was talking about, to be honest. Weaving story arcs, I guess? It's not so much about the weaving of the story arcs, I think, but I think it's about the interesting way of being able to bring them in at times. I'm sure that if you look at it from like a pure like, is this realistic standpoint, you'll be like, no, there's no way this is realistic. Like, come on. You expect me to believe that we, I don't know, follow this story path, and then somehow exactly this other character's story is relevant to it. No, of course, that doesn't make sense. It's entirely probably unreal, like improbable, but stories are told about the improbable, is what I would say. And also, from a meta perspective, why am I going to have my players follow a story arc which is not relevant to the overarching story or relevant to any of them? They've put in the time to tell me what they're interested and invested in. I'm going to feed back with that and be like, yes, this is what you're interested in. This is the story I'll give, you know? So even you might criticize it as improbable, but I would retort and say it's exactly plausible enough to be a story and enjoyable enough to follow along with. That's the ultimate goal. Anyway, on that note, I think I'll round this episode off here for realsies this time. So if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye-bye for now.